Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Before we begin today's video, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to each and every one of you who tuned in to watch my previous video on the enigmatic Men in Black. Your overwhelmingly positive feedback served to bolster my creative spirit and has instilled within me the confidence to continue producing content in a similar vein, with the assurance that it will be met with your support and appreciation. So for all of that, I want to say thank you so much. It really meant a great deal to me, sincerely. For decades, the planet Mars has remained a prime focal point for scientific exploration, as we are all aware. It is widely speculated that this red planet was once akin to our own, teeming with flowing oceans and conceivably even harboring life. However, what led to its transformation into an arid and lifeless world? One scientist has proposed a theory that is anything but natural, and to be blunt, it's quite disturbing. Dr. John Brandenburg, a distinguished chief scientist at Kepler Aerospace, gained recognition in the 1980s and 90s as NASA's preeminent authority on Mars. His profound knowledge of space propulsion is evident from his possession of 10 patents. Throughout his illustrious career, Brandenburg has occupied several top-level scientific positions at institutions such as Sandia Labs, Orbital Tech, MRI, and Kepler, and has frequently been sought after for high-level scientific roles owing to his expertise in plasma physics and space propulsion. Notably, he was appointed as the department project manager for the Clementine moon missions and made invaluable contributions to the development of the MET electric propulsion that was utilized in numerous Mars probes in the 1990s. In 2006, he was recruited once again to work on another Mars project. In this capacity, he advanced a highly controversial theory that Mars had suffered 2 massive nuclear explosions in the distant past, triggered by the high concentration of uranium and thorium present on the planet's surface. Initially, Brandenburg's colleagues were skeptical of this hypothesis, believing that the data had been collected from a location here on Earth that had experienced a nuclear explosion. However, their doubts were swiftly dispelled when they learned that the data had, in fact, originated from Mars. Dr. Brandenburg observed that a planet's atmosphere is subject to significant erosion over time, particularly in the case of Mars, where the absence of a robust magnetic field exacerbates this process. As a result, lighter isotopes are more susceptible to erosion than heavier isotopes, leading to an eventual accumulation of the latter. Through his research, he noted that the distribution patterns of uranium and thorium on Mars were in alignment with nuclear explosions that had occurred at 2 specific points on the planet. Nevertheless, his findings were met with skepticism, and he was accused of deviating from established scientific norms. Disenchanted with NASA's disregard for scientific rigor and their preference for preconceived narratives, he resigned and became the leading plasma propulsion physicist at the Aerospace Corporation, where he held a TS-SCI clearance. During his time there, he uncovered and shared with his colleagues data on UAPs being tracked by the United States Air Force from a landing takeoff spot in the Atlantic Ocean. Over the course of his career, Dr. John Brandenburg has diligently pursued his research, collecting data from numerous Mars probes to ensure the reproducibility of his findings. In his book, Life and Death on Mars, he discusses the peculiar elemental anomalies present on the planet's surface, which have led him and other scientists to postulate that 2 massive thermonuclear weapons exploded on Mars in the remote past. This theory would account for the anomalous presence of xenon, krypton, and uranium-thorium on the planet. According to the hypothesis, one of the weapons detonated above Mars' Acadalium after the planet's oceans had already dried up. The explosion would have thrown debris globally, releasing significant quantities of xenon. Furthermore, a uranium-thorium-rich debris layer would have irradiated the surface via delayed neutrons, depositing thorium-uranium fission residues in the surface layer. High concentrations of radioactive potassium, on the other hand, would be found buried at the Acadalium site. Dr. Brandenburg explains how Xenon-129 is produced in devices on Earth. In order to boost the yield of a hydrogen bomb, the bomb casing is typically made of uranium-238 or thorium. Accordingly, xenon-129 is produced only in small amounts by normal fission, but in a conventional hydrogen bomb explosion, it is produced in large amounts. Furthermore, Dr. Brandenburg looked at the distributional patterns of uranium and thorium on the surface of the red planet and concluded that they are consistent with nuclear explosions which were centered on two specific points on the planet. The high concentration of xenon in the Martian atmosphere is a unique feature of Mars's atmosphere and differs starkly from the isotopic mass spectrum of xenon elsewhere in the solar system. This feature is found both in the isotopic spectra seen by landers and also that seen in Mars meteorites, he concluded. In addition to his nuclear explosion hypothesis, Brandenburg posits that Mars harbors traces of an ancient humanoid civilization that prospered during a time when the planet enjoyed Earth-like conditions. According to his findings, this civilization left behind remnants at various locations, including the well-known Cydonia Mensa and Galaxia's Chaos, which have been the subject of extensive research. The data gathered from these sites has given rise to the Cydonian hypothesis, which proposes the existence of an indigenous Bronze Age civilization on the Red Planet. Dr. Brandenburg suggests that the xenon, krypton, and uranium-thorium anomalies could be explained by a large thermonuclear weapon explosion in the past, and little else. The weapon is thought to have detonated over Mars' acadalium after the oceans had dried up, spreading debris globally and releasing significant amounts of xenon. A uranium-thorium-rich debris layer also irradiated the surface with delayed neutrons. Thorium-uranium fission residues are expected to be found in the surface layer, while buried radioactive potassium will be found at the acadalium site in large amounts. A comparison of Mars isotopes with those from meteorites on Earth and other planets that have sampled the solar nebula reveals that Mars' noble gas isotopes, particularly xenon and argon, are quite exotic. This is because Mars meteorites were identified as Martian due to the trapped Mars atmosphere, which has an unusual isotopic signature. It is believed that Mars was similar to Earth for most of its history, with an ocean and a greenhouse effect similar to that of Venus. The comparison of Mars isotopes with those from meteorites on Earth and other planets that have sampled the solar nebula reveals that Mars' noble gas isotopes, particularly xenon and argon, are quite exotic. This is because Mars meteorites were identified as Martian due to the trapped Mars atmosphere, which has an unusual isotopic signature. It is believed that Mars was similar to Earth for most of its history, with an ocean and a greenhouse effect similar to that of Venus. However, approximately 500 million years ago, a Chicxulub-sized impact occurred on Mars, forming the Lyot impact basin and causing the planet's climate to collapse, ultimately resulting in the drying up of its oceans. After this cataclysm, Brandenburg believes Mars experienced the proposed nuclear catastrophe. This nuclear detonation hypothesis features the explosion of a large thermonuclear weapon with fusion plus fission over Mare Acadalium and possibly a smaller bomb over Utopia Planum in the Northern Plains region on Mars, which, interestingly, are two sites of potential archaeology. The xenon isotope mass spectrum of Mars's atmosphere matches that of open-air nuclear testing on Earth, and is characteristic of fast neutron fission rather than what would be produced by a moderated nuclear reactor. The explosions would have been large enough to create a global catastrophe and change Mars's global climate. In the introductory segment of this video, I described this ancient nuclear detonation hypothesis as disturbing, so allow me to elaborate on the rationale behind that statement. According to the available data, the size of the larger weapon would have been 800 meters in length, equivalent in size to the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, currently the tallest building on Earth. Furthermore, it allegedly possessed a staggering potential energy output of 1 billion megatons, or 1 petaton, which is more than enough cause for alarm. For comparison, the Russian Tsar Bomba, the largest nuclear weapon ever detonated, possessed an awe-inspiring energy yield of over 50 megatons, which is equivalent to the explosive force of 50 million tons of conventional weapons. In perspective, the magnitude of its destructive power surpasses that of all the munitions discharged in World War II by a factor of 10, and exceeds the combined might of the atomic bombs unleashed on Hiroshima and Nagasaki by over 1,500 times. We are talking about a weapon that would have been 20 million times more powerful than the Tsar Bomba. The evidence for a Mars paleonuclear event is quite strong. With the concentration of xenon in the Martian atmosphere, the evidence from krypton abundance, and the detected pattern of excess abundance of uranium and thorium on Mars's surface relative to Mars meteorites, all suggesting that these two large thermonuclear explosions may really have taken place. However, there are no craters to speak of. If a natural nuclear reactor had exploded, it would have left one. It would have been large, and it would have been deep. The absence of a crater implies that an airburst took place after the oceans had dried up. Given the evidence that has been accumulated and the meticulously detailed scientific information presented in Brandenburg's literature, it does appear plausible to infer that at the very least, a colossal, catastrophic event transpired on Mars in the remote past. Apart from the astonishing revelations concerning the Red Planet, there has been conjecture suggesting that numerous wars may have been waged eons ago on an unprecedented scale in our cosmic neighborhood. Undoubtedly, all of this may initially strike you as being reminiscent of Star Wars, yet upon further examination of the narratives encapsulated within the most ancient traditions of our planet, it becomes evident that numerous facets bear a striking resemblance to a massive military conflict spanning the solar system, if not the galaxy. It is said that one highly acclaimed scientist held a strong belief in the plausibility of atomic weapons having been used in ancient times. Dr. J. Robert Oppenheimer, an American theoretical physicist who is recognized as the father of the atomic bomb due to his involvement in the Manhattan Project, exhibited a profound fascination with Hindu philosophy and culture, which led him to delve into the ancient Sanskrit texts of India, including the Bhagavad Gita and the Mahabharata. It is rumored that he even went to the lengths of learning Sanskrit in order to fully comprehend the Bhagavad Gita in its purest form. When asked how he felt about the success of the first atomic bomb detonation in history, his response was, "Well, it is the first nuclear explosion in the modern world." This statement appears to indicate that Oppenheimer believed nuclear weapons had been used on our planet in the distant past, and the Sanskrit texts do appear to describe such weaponry. As recounted in the ancient Indian Sanskrit epic, the Mahabharata, a catastrophic nuclear war ravaged the Earth over 4,000 years ago. This extensive 1.8 million word manuscript chronicles the tale of a cataclysmic conflict that culminated in complete annihilation, characteristic of an atomic blast. According to the text, Vimanas, flying machines, were deployed to release a single projectile, charged with the incomprehensible power of the universe. The resultant explosion manifested as an incandescent column of smoke and fire, as brilliant as 10,000 suns, causing the earth to convulse, while arrows of flame rained continuously. The searing heat wrought the death of both animals and humans, with aquatic life perishing as the waters boiled. Subsequently, hair and nails began to fall out. Food became poisonous, and pottery cracked inexplicably. Birds lost their innate sense of direction, which we now know is determined by the Earth's magnetic fields. The Mahabharata is generally viewed as a work of myth. Nevertheless, one must ponder how such an accurate depiction of a nuclear explosion could be narrated without first-hand witness testimony. Within the Bhagavad Gita, a section known as the Book of Drona expounds upon the existence of Astra, which were considered to be mystical weapons of unparalleled power. These weapons were described as having the ability to wipe out entire armies, leaving behind only the faintest vestiges of life. The devastation wrought by the most potent of these weapons, the Brahmastra, is said to have been the work of the god Brahma, who imbued it with the full force of the universe. The Brahmastra was likened to an immense and unstoppable iron thunderbolt, capable of reducing entire races to ash with its incandescent flame. Its destructive power was said to be so overwhelming that no defense or countermeasure could hope to withstand it. Upon detonation, the weapon produced an awe-inspiring column of smoke and flame that blazed as brightly as 10,000 suns, leaving behind only barren and lifeless wastelands. The final battle of Kurukshetra culminated with the deployment of the Brahmastra by the victorious Pandavas, who emerged triumphant but found themselves facing an unimaginable wasteland with no one left to rule or occupy. The region, now present-day Rajasthan, had been transformed into a desert, and the war marked the dawn of the current age, known as the Kali Yuga. According to Dr. Joseph P. Farrell, an Oxford-educated historian who has dedicated a lifetime to investigating and writing about alternative history, World War II, and secret technologies, a grandiose intergalactic battle occurred in our solar system millions of years ago, featuring the participation of highly advanced extraterrestrial beings. Dr. Farrell, an esteemed author of various works including Cosmic War, Interplanetary Warfare, Modern Physics, and Ancient Texts, attests to the presence of significant evidence indicating the occurrence of catastrophic destruction within our solar system. The historical scholar asserts that two major space wars were waged, one 65 million years ago and the other 3.2 million years ago, and emphasizes the need to seriously consider the ancient myths of space warfare in the heavens, utilizing ancient artifacts, advanced concepts in modern physics, and the texts of ancient myths. In his argument, Dr. Farrell posits that an interplanetary war of epic proportions was fought in our own solar system, using weapons of extraordinary power and complexity. Many ancient historians and authors have written about these so-called technologies of the gods, which include not only the mysterious flying machines known as Vimanas, but also the formidable weapons of the gods, such as the Vajra, an artifact of the Anunnaki gods that produces lightning. Dr. Farrell cites the ancient Sumerian god Ninurta, who wielded lightning, as sounding strikingly similar to an electrical discharge produced in a modern laboratory studying plasma physics. The echoes of this epic space war may potentially be reflected in the ancient texts of the Sumerians, Babylonians, Egyptians, biblical texts, the Vedic tradition, and the mythology of the New World, from the Maya and the Aztecs to the myths of some indigenous North American tribes. There exists a wealth of evidence that I could expound upon, but I'll save it for a future video. As most of you already know, I co-host a podcast with my buddy Ty over on his channel, Total Disclosure, where we discuss anything and everything related to the phenomenon. We bring guests on for conversations and much more. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to us here on YouTube, follow us, and give us a positive review on Spotify if you enjoy the content. My show, Podcast Zero, will be returning very soon, and it's a relaunch considering the major changes I made to it. If you'd like to help support my work, you can make a donation through my Cash App, $YouTube Tom. I will be adding a join button to the channel in the coming weeks, along with a revamp of my Patreon. None of this is required, but it is sincerely appreciated. If you enjoy my content, you can also help by hitting the like button, subscribing if you haven't already, clicking the bell for notifications, and sharing my videos on social media or with friends and family. Thank you again for taking the time to watch my video today, and I'll see you in a future timeline somewhere in three-dimensional reality. Take care, everyone.